Hello friends, a very warm welcome to the Crochet Hook channel. See, today we have this very beautiful mussel shell crochet pattern that we're going to crochet together. See how beautifully textured it looks. I have worked it in a multicolor. You can also work it in single color. See, the texture of this pattern is so absolutely beautiful. I have also worked the swatch in a single shade. You can have a look how it looks in a single shade and in multicolor also. The looks are stunning, and in stitches, if we see horizontally, then this is how it looks on the back side and this is the front side. And let's see the stitches quickly. So horizontally, from this first chain till this SC here, it is 12 stitches. Again, from this chain till this SC here, it is 12 stitches. So horizontally it is a repeat of 12 stitches, and vertically here, if we see, row 3 and row 4 are repeated over and over. It's a 2-row repeat, so row 3 and row 4 are repeated over and over to reach the desired length of the project. And it's an absolutely wonderful pattern and absolutely easy as well. For the friends who are joining me here for the first time, please do consider subscribing to my channel. That really connects, motivates, and really means a lot. Having all that being said, let's get ahead with this beautiful pattern. So here I have chosen colors of my choice and a pair of scissors, a sewing needle to sew in the loose ends, and a crochet hook of 3.0 millimeters. Let's get ahead with the pattern. So to begin with, work a slip knot, and as I've already stated, this pattern is a repeat of 12 stitches, and we are going to here work 4 repeats. We'll be getting 3 repeats of the pattern, and rest of the stitches will be used in the edge stitches on both the sides. So chain a total of 48. See, I have worked all my 48 chains. Now skip 4 chains, insert the hook into the 5th chain and work 1 DC. We have begun with the foundation row here. Yarn over into the next chain, work 1 DC. Yarn over, work 1 DC into the next chain. Yarn over into the next chain, work 1 DC. Simple. Just keep working 1 DC till you have a total of 45 DCs in the end. Just keep working DCs till the end. So here this foundation row ends. To begin the row 1, chain 3 and turn the work, and we are going to work elongated DCs. So then yarn over, insert the hook into the next DC, pull up a loop, then yarn over, pull through 1 loop first, then yarn over, pull through the 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the remaining 2 loops, 1 elongated DC, worked again into the next DC. Insert the hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 loop first, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Again, work 1 elongated DC the same way in the next DC below. First chain 3 also stands for an elongated DC. We have 4 worked. Again, into the next DC below, work 1 elongated DC the same way. So we have 5 elongated DCs worked, counting first chain 3 also 1 elongated DC. Then work 3 chains, and nextly we'll be working DCs but with a long stretched loop. So here where we just worked a last elongated DC, after that skip 6 DCs below, and between the 6 and 7 DCs here insert the hook and pull up a long loop like this. Then simply work 1 DC, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Again into the same stitch, insert the hook, pull up a long loop, then work it like a DC. 2 DCs worked. Again into the same stitch, work 1 stretched up DC. I'll be calling it like this maybe. Work 1 more DC here, 4, and into the same stitch work 1 more stretched up DC. So we have 5 stretched DCs worked here. This is 1 shell, and now we'll be working backwards. See, here we worked the shell, so skip 2 DCs, we are moving backwards, and in this space of the 2 DCs we'll be working our next shell the same way. So have a closer look. Now yarn over, and now skip this 2 DCs here and insert into this space, pull up a loop as shown, and then work 1 DC. Again into the same stitch, insert the hook, pull a long loop, then work it like a DC. 2, done. Yarn over, again into the same space, insert the hook, pull up a long loop, work it like a DC. 3 DCs worked. Again into the same stitch, work 1 more stretched up DC. 4, and just work one more stretched loop DC in the same stitch. See, a shell is created. This is how it looks. Then work 3 chains, 1, 2 and 3. Now again, see here where we worked the first shell. From there, after that, skip 6 DCs. Atop the 6th DC here, simply work 1 SC. So this is the one repeat of the pattern. Again, work 3 chains and then skip 6 DCs after the SC. From here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. After the 6 DC here, we'll create a first shell. So again, work 5 elongated DCs, stretched up DCs here, as we are calling it here, to create the first shell here. 1, 2, then 3, 4 and 5. See, one shell is created and now we'll work backwards. So from the shell, we'll be going back, skip 2 DCs. After this space, skip 2 DCs, and in this space here, create 5 stretched up DCs across this shell like this. 1, 2, 'just stretch loop all the way up, 3 and work it like a DC, 4 and one more, 5. The next shell is created here. This is how it looks. Again, work 3 chains, 1, 2 and 3, and after this space where we worked our first shell here, count 6 DCs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Atop the 6 DC here, work 1 SC. Simple. Again, we'll go for one more repeat. So chain 3 and yarn over, and after this SC, skip 6 DCs, and in the space after the 6 DC, work 5 stretched loop DCs like this. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Then skip 2 DCs backwards, and in this space again here work 5 stretch loop DCs like this, as we have done earlier 2 times. 2. I have loose ends there, so it will be well arranged afterwards. Don't get confused with that. 4 and one more, 5. And then work 3 chains, and again from this space skip 5 DCs, and atop the 6th DC we'll begin working the elongated DC. So work 1 elongated DC atop the 6th DC, work 1 elongated DC atop the next DC below, yarn over, work 1 elongated DC atop the next DC, yarn over, work 1 elongated DC atop the next DC, and yarn over, insert the hook in this top 4th chain and work the last elongated DC on this edge like this. So we have worked 5 elongated DCs atop 5. So here to begin the row 1, we work 3 chains and then we work 4 consecutive elongated DCs in the 4 DCs below. Then we chain 3 and skip 6 DCs below, and in this space between the 6 and 7 DC below we worked 1 shell with stretched loops, and then we moved back 2 stitches, and in this stitch here, in this space here, we created another shell with the stretched DCs, and again we worked 3 chains, skip 5 DCs. Atop the 6th one we worked 1 SC, and then again repeat the same pattern from here. It's repeated again from here. So again created the shell and then chain 3, work 1 SC. Like that we went till end, and here we didn't work 1 SC, but we began working the elongated DCs on the edge here. So then to begin the row 2, work 3 chains and turn the work, and just as we did in row 1, yarn over and into the elongated DC below, insert the hook, work 1 elongated DC, into the next DC work 1 elongated DC. I call it elongated DC. You can also refer to as a treble maybe. So again we have created 5 elongated DCs atop, 5 elongated DCs below. First chain 3 also stands for a elongated DC, and then work chain 1 here, just work 1 chain here, then yarn over, and we have here 10 stretch loop DCs. So then around the first one, from front to back to front, insert the hook like this as shown, pull up a loop and work 1 DC. We have worked 1 FPDC, front post DC. Again around the next DC of the shell, insert the hook like this and work 1 DC. We are working FPDC atop every DC ahead. Work 1 FPDC around the next DC. Work 1 FPDC around the next DC ahead as shown. Yarn over, work 1 FPDC around this 5th DC of this shell. 5 FPDCs of this shell done. Now we'll work the next 5 FPDCs in the stretch loop DCs of the next shell. So work 1 FPDC atop this stretch loop DC below, work 1 FPDC atop the next DC below, yarn over, work 1 FPDC atop the next DC below, yarn over, work 1 FPDC along the next DC below, then yarn over, work this last and the 10th FPDC around this last DC below. See, this is how the shell looks, and this is how it looks on the front side. The texture is coming up beautifully. And now work 3 chains, 1, 2 and 3, and then skip all this midsection. We have created 10 FPDCs atop the shell. Chain 3 and skip all this midsection of the chains, and we'll straight away begin working the FPDCs in the next shell. So skip all this, yarn over, and around this first DC of the shell below, from front to back to front, insert the hook and work 1 FPDC. Yarn over, work 1 FPDC around the next DC below. Yarn over, work 1 FPDC around the next DC below. 3. Work 1 FPDC around the next DC below. 4. Work 1 FPDC around the next DC below. 5. Now we'll be working into the next shell, and it's 5 DCs. So around the next DC below, work 1 FPDC. In continuation, we have to work it like this. Work 1 FPDC atop the next DC below. 2. Work 1 FPDC around the next DC below. 3. 2 more to go. Around the next FPDC, around the next DC below, work 1 FPDC. Around this last DC also, simply work 1 FPDC. Again, we have created 10 FPDC here atop the 2 shells in the row 1. This is how it looks. This is the back side of the pattern. Then again work 3 chains, 1, 2 and 3, and see, skip all this midsection of the chains, and again simply begin working with the FPDCs. So again work 10 FPDCs atop around the 10 DCs below. So just complete it, and I'll see you here. See, I've completed this last shell also, and then to end this row 2 here, chain 1, yarn over, and we have 5 elongated DCs below. Simply work 1 elongated DC atop each of the 5 elongated DCs below, just as we did earlier. Insert the hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 loop, then yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Simple. And then yarn over, and atop this top 3rd chain, insert the hook and work 1 elongated DC. So we have 5 elongated DC on either side on the edges. Here we worked 3 chains, then worked 4 elongated DCs atop 4 elongated DCs below. Then we chained 1 on either side. See, in this row 2 we chain 1 on the edges, and in between we chain 3. Just remember this much. So then after chain 1, we simply created 10 FPDCs around the DCs below in the shell, and then chain 3, again create and skip all this chain section, create 10 FPDCs around the 10 DCs of the shell below, chain 3, create 10 FPDCs, and then we chained 1 and created elongated DCs atop each of the 5 elongated DCs below. See, this is how it looks on the front side. The texture is really coming up beautiful. This is the back side. Now we'll begin with the row 3. Row 3 is just like row 1. I'm bringing in a new shade. If you're continuing with the same shade, that's fine. So then chain 3, this chain 3 also stands for one elongated DC. Then yarn over into the next 4 consecutive DCs below, work one elongated DC atop each of them. 1, then yarn over, work one elongated DC atop the next elongated DC below. 3 done, counting first chain 3 also one elongated DC. 4th done. Then in the last elongated DC also simply work one elongated DC. This is just like a row 1, but for the repeat I'll recommend to consider row 3 and row 4. So then it's just like row 1. So work 3 chains, and here in this FPDCs skip 6 FPDCs, and after the 6th FPDC, in the space here between the 6th and 7 FPDCs, stretch this loop higher and simply work one DC, stretch loop DC, work one more DC the same way, the 3rd DC done, work the 4th DC and then work one more DC. We are creating a shell here. 5 stretch loop DCs are worked. Now we'll move backwards, so skip 2 DCs backwards here, skip this one, and in this space here we are going to work the next shell. So yarn over and insert the hook in this space on the back side and work one stretch loop DC. Just like this, create 4 more stretch loop DCs. 2, 3, 4 and 5. Simple, a beautiful shell is created. This is how it looks. Now chain 3 again. Now in this chain 3 here, at the center of it simply work one SC. That's it. This is the repeat. Now chain 3 again, and again we have 10 FPDCs, skip 6 FPDCs. In the space between 6th and 7th FPDC, create a shell with stretch loop DCs, a shell with 5 stretch loop DCs here. 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now moving backwards, skip 2 DCs, moving backwards, and in this space again insert the hook and work 5 stretch loop DCs like this across this shell, the first shell that we created, just as is shown. It's very easy. 2 done. 3, stretch the loop all the way up and then work it like a DC. 4 and one more here. 5. Simple. Again a beautiful shell is created. Then chain 3, and in the next chain 3 below simply work one SC there at the center of it. Simple. Chain 3 again, and again we have this shell with 10 FPDCs, skip 6. In the space between the 6th and 7th FPDC, work a shell and work another shell moving backwards. I have worked this repeat, please work it, and having worked this shell we have 3 shells worked. Then work 3 chains. In the beginning also we work 3 chains in this row, and then yarn over, simply work one elongated DC atop each of the elongated DCs below. So work 5 elongated DCs. 1, 2, 3, 4, yarn over, insert the hook in this top 3rd chain and work one elongated DC here. 5 elongated DCs worked. This is how it looks. This is the front side. Now we'll go for row 4, which is just like row 2 here. The pattern is similar. Chain 3 and turn the work. Then yarn over, and we have 4 elongated DCs below. Work one elongated DC atop each of the 4 DCs ahead. 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we have on both the edges 5 elongated DCs worked in all the rows. And then see, in row 2 we chained 1, so chain 1, and here we have 10 DCs below. Around the first DC, simply work 1 FPDC, then yarn over. Around the next DC, work 1 FPDC, front post double crochet. Yarn over, work 1 FPDC atop the next DC, work 1 FPDC around the next DC below, work 1 FPDC around the next DC below. This is just like row 2. Again, we have 5 more DCs of the other shell. So around the next DC, work 1 FPDC, just stretch it a little and you will get to see the DC below. Yarn over, and again around the next DC below, work 1 FPDC. Yarn over, work 1 FPDC around the next DC, work 1 FPDC around the next DC, and yarn over, work the 10th FPDC around the next DC below. This beautiful shell is coming up. 10 FPDCs work. Then in row 2, we used to chain 3 in the middle section. So chain 3 and then skip all this mid section of the chains and again create 10 FPDCs around 10 DCs below in the next shell. So work 1 FPDC around this DC below. Around the next DC, work 1 FPDC. Around the next DC, work 1 FPDC. Around the next DC, work 1 FPDC. Around the next DC, work 1 FPDC, front post double crochet. 5 done, 5 more to go. Around the next DC, work 1 FPDC. Around the next DC of the shell below, work 1 FPDC. Work 1 FPDC around the next DC of the shell. See, we insert from front to back to front, from front to back to front, and then work it like a DC. Again, this is the 10th FPDC worked in the 10th DC below. This is how it looks, coming up really beautiful. Chain 3 and skip all this midsection and work 10 FPDCs atop this 10 DCs of the shell below, and then on this side we'll end it together. Just work 10 FPDCs. See, I have worked it. The last shell is done, worked, and then after the 10th FPDC, see, we chained 1 on either side in row 2. So in row 4 also, just chain 1. Then yarn over, and atop 5 elongated DCs below, simply work 5 elongated DC atop each of them. 1 elongated DC atop each of the 5 elongated DCs below. We're just maintaining the edge like that. Atop every elongated DC, work 1 elongated DC. 5 atop 5. I'm sorry for this out of focus section. It will soon resume, but you are well acquainted with this edge. Is the same pattern. See, this is the back side, and so we have here 4 rows got completed. This is the front side. This is how it looks. See how textured it's coming up. Have a closer look. In single color also it looks absolutely wonderful. So here we worked, so just keep repeating row 3 and row 4 over and over to reach the desired length. Row 2 is like row 4, row 1 is like row 3. This is how it looks. As I've already explained that odd number rows are similar and even number rows are similar. Row 1 is like row 3, row 2 is like row 4. So just for the repeat sake, remember to repeat row 3 and row 4 over and over to reach the desired length of the project. It's simple and yet it looks so beautifully textured and awesome. I loved working this beautiful pattern with you. Have fun learning, have fun crocheting. Stay safe. See you next time.